Hi everybody, my name is Drice, and I want to tell you about my 2 stepmothers. Yeah, 2 stepmothers. We had a little intrigue in our family, so listen and watch. My father and I lived together my whole life. My mother left and my father grieved for a long time after her. But after a while, he met a woman. They dated, and everything seemed to be going well. Personally, I was very happy for him, because Dad seemed to blossom. My father decided to propose to her and invited her to come to our house to introduce me to her and to show her the house. As soon as Anne crossed the threshold of the house, her expression changed. "Honey, are you sick? You look a little pale."
"Huh? What? No thanks, Bill. I'm fine. Just a little dizzy. I think it was the excitement."
"Let me get you some water." Dad ran into the kitchen. I was sitting on the floor behind the couch at the time. My phone had just fallen out of my hands and I was looking for it. They didn't notice me. Then Dad ran out and said he'd better run to the drugstore and get some medicine. Anne thanked him and he left. She sat down on the couch and someone called her.
"Hello? Yes. Hi, Mary. Yes. I'm at his house. I'm in shock. I'm shocked. His house is a barn. He looks like a decent man, but he's a bum. Yeah, well, I'm going to stay here for a while and then I'm going to leave." "No, thank you. Despite his concern, I'm not going to spend the rest of my days in a shack. All that nonsense about love being better than money, that's what losers say."
I couldn't stand it and got up from the floor. Anne dropped her phone from her hands. "Hi."
"Oh, hello, and you must be—"
"Drice. I'm the son of that caring bum."
"Oh, sorry, you've got it all wrong. It was my friend who called me, and she—"
"Don't bother. Tell my father you have to run and go away."
"Got it."
She packed her things and confronted him on the doorstep. Daddy asked why she was leaving, and she said she'd gotten some urgent need to run and ran away, then disappeared, just as she had promised. Dad was in a lot of pain again, couldn't come to his senses, and I didn't tell him anything because it would have killed him. Time passed, and he came back to life again. He looked even better than before. He blossomed again, and then I noticed that he had someone in him. This time it was Janet, also a bitch. My father really looked good. He didn't buy expensive things, we didn't live rich, but for some reason, women thought he had a lot of money. So did this Janet. She was good looking, acted modest, until she came to our house. She made her feet after a couple of days too, citing an urgent need to leave to visit her sick mother. I saw her in town, riding in a wheelbarrow with some guy. Apparently, she found her daddy, just like she wanted. Only my dad, he went back to being himself again. This time harder and for longer. I became seriously worried about him. I didn't even know how to help. And one day, some good news came to us. In the morning, there was a knock on the door. It was my grandmother's driver. Yes, my grandmother lived richly. She still felt guilty about her daughter leaving me, so she helped from time to time. We found out she was getting worse. She had been sick for the last few years. Anyway, she left me a legacy after she passed away. She passed everything on to me, for which I was grateful. Since I was a minor, the resources were managed by my father. We immediately moved to live in her mansion. My father took a job at her firm, which I also inherited. The position was a small one, but that was until he learned more. The news spread immediately. He and I were even on TV a couple of times, me as the future owner of a major company. After that, there were flowers and greeting cards on our doorstep. It was Anne, only she liked pretentiousness and grand gestures. Daddy, hearing her name, froze. "She writes that she's asking to see me?" "Yeah." "Are you coming?" "I don't know." "Dad, as soon as we got money, she was there. Don't you think it's strange?" "All women like money, son, don't they?" "I don't know. It seems awful to me." "Janet came to see me at work today." "Did she? So?" "As I said, all women like money. It's just a question of who's willing to do what for it." "Do you have a plan?" "Yeah. Will you play along?" "You betcha." I liked my father's optimistic attitude, so I listened to his plan with interest, and all I had to do was to include the actor in me. The game began. A couple of days later, Anne knocked at the door of the house. I didn't open it for a long time. and then came out, having previously rubbed my eyes with my hands. Anne gasped and asked what was wrong. I told her that my father's health had deteriorated, but worse, he had lost his memory and now remembered almost nothing.
How much of nothing?
For the last couple of years, for sure.
Oh, can I visit him?
Sure. She walked into his room and timidly said hello, and then introduced herself as an old acquaintance of his. They had a nice little chat, and she started coming to see him every day. I could see that one thing that made her uncomfortable was our last conversation. Before she left, I asked to have tea with her, and she said she was embarrassed about the last time. It's okay, it's in the past. I'm not angry. I just want my dad to get better.
Really? I'm very glad. I've changed, really. Call me anytime and I'll be there.
I saw her off. An hour later, Janet came, and I played the same part. These two grown women were hovering around Dad, trying to please. That was Dad's way of getting revenge. It might seem ugly and mean-spirited of a man, but you didn't see his condition, how broken and depressed he was when they left him. Daddy took each of them on dates. They went on walks, went to the movies, even went abroad for 2 days with each of them. Janet didn't know anything about Anne, but she guessed it was the same with Anne. This only added to the fire. Dad's love triangle was a success. So, what's next, Dad? What? Well, are you just going to keep dating both of them? There's got to be an ending or a denouncement at some point. And then it gets better. That night he rented a restaurant and invited both halves there. It was beautiful. The women had angry faces, of course. They were perplexed as to what was going on. And then Dad proposed to both of them, saying he couldn't choose. I thought they would send him away, but no. Janet was the first to say yes, and Anne said yes after her. Dad was even a little confused himself, and I laughed as I listened to him tell the story. How much do you have to love money to live like that? They chose the day of the wedding, and we planned the evening at the same restaurant in a small circle. We really didn't want it to go to the press, so we did everything quietly. That's how I got 2 stepmothers at once. And you know, life had never been such fun. Anne cooked my breakfast. Janet did my homework. They took turns taking care of my father. Sometimes they fought over who was going to iron his shirt. Almost every week there was a furniture rearrangement. One liking one style, the other the opposite. Dad watched them in silence, and I was getting tired of the noise and swearing. Dad, can you make up your mind? 2 months has passed. Why, don't you like it? I understand you're taking revenge on them, but... Revenge? No, it's their mercantilism. What do you mean? I didn't promise any of them a nice life. We weren't even legally married. They chose to cohabitate with me just for the money. And what's the plan? I am not choosing any of them. I'm just waiting for them to leave. I'm not keeping them. We lived like that for another month until we saw Anne and Janet fighting over the hairbrush. They tried to drag me into their argument to decide who got the thing, but I told them not to drag me into it.
I can't take it anymore.
Neither can I. They turned to my father and told him to choose. Dad was sitting there, quietly drinking his tea. And why did you think I had to choose? Are you things? The stepmothers fell silent. You made that decision. You made your choice.
But you made us an offer.
I asked and you said yes.
Are you washing your hands of it?
I give you the right to choose. I'm not holding you back. You're human beings, not objects. And if any of you are uncomfortable living like this, why do you put up with it? For what, huh? They had nothing to say. Dad got up from his chair, closed the paper, sighed and said, I lied to you about the amnesia. I just wanted to see your reaction and in general, whether you had changed.
What? How dare you?
I always tell my son that all women love money. It's okay. Who doesn't love it? The other question is, how far can a man go for them and for what? Everything you see now and what we live on does not belong to me, you know? I couldn't offer you anything more than feelings before, and it's the same now. Anne and Janet started screaming that he was such a jerk, that what he had done was dishonourable, that he had insulted and hurt himself. And Daddy said they lived in the conditions they wanted to live in. An hour later, Janet and Anne were both out of the house. They were gone. I laughed, asked my dad if the game was worth it, and my dad smiled and said, it was funny. I haven't had 2 wives yet.
Hello everyone, my name is Anthony, 4 years ago, I met a wonderful girl, Leah, when we were 20 years old. With her, I experienced the greatest love, as well as the most frenzied relationships. It is false to imagine, but I was caught cheating, and not a wife with a mistress, but on the contrary. A year earlier, my family and I moved to another country because of work. I really didn't want to leave my home, but my mother reassured me that changes are always for the best, especially since we never went far and for so long, and you may like it. We packed up and left, and a new life began. The first thing I did was go to university. I made friends. Some of them we began to communicate closely. So a circle of friends appeared, and after a while, I accidentally met a girl. She cut me off in a car, and I almost had an accident because of her. I caught up with her and honked my horn. I was in a really bad mood that day, but here I was. She asked me to take it out on her. When we stopped, I behaved like an ungentlemanly person. I started swearing and shouting, and she looked at me so easily and simply from the car, lowered the window, and then slowly gave the middle finger and drove away. I was so outraged by the impudence that I even laughed. This girl is etched into my memory. It looked spectacular, very stylish. I wished I had met her. It must have been fate for us to meet again. The next day, my friend and I went to a club where I ran into her on the dance floor. She recognized me right away, which was understandable because she was waving her middle finger at me and smiling. I went up to her and we started dancing together, and that's how we met. I walked her home, and since then, I've walked her every day. Oh, I fell in love with her completely and irrevocably. She was my first love, and it was also mutual. We had a crazy relationship. We went out at night until morning, loved to dance, went out of town together spontaneously, drank alcohol in front of the TV, went crazy, ate a lot, made love, and when we quarreled, we did it just as beautifully and vividly. Smashing dishes, she slammed doors, locked herself in the bathroom. I twirled my finger at my temple and called her hysterical. A couple of hours later, when we were both out of breath, we kissed and everything was fine again. A year later, we moved in together and got married. As soon as we celebrated this event in a small family circle, my father said that we should return to our country. I couldn't believe it because my wife was finishing school. She couldn't just snap and leave, and I needed to get a job where I was going for many years. In general, it was decided. I left and she stayed. We agreed that we should visit each other as much as possible. I missed her like crazy. She came to see me during the holidays and birthdays. Parting was a tantamount to torture, but we managed. This long year has finally passed. She finished her studies and came to me. Well, then my job didn't work out, so we came back to her homeland and decided to live there for a while. To be honest, perhaps this distance changed us a little. We both became a little different, and it was already difficult to accept each other not as before. Our swearing no longer resembled those that used to be. There was no longer any romance or something. Everything became tougher, rougher, and without reconciliation in the form of kisses and sex. One day, she said a lot of unnecessary things, and I couldn't stand it and hit her, which I later regretted. She did not forgive me and kicked me out of the house. I left, buying the nearest ticket. That's how we broke up, but we haven't filed for divorce yet. I went back to myself again, trying to build a new life. I was angry with her for a long time, but I didn't call her because she sent me away. So 3 months passed. I began to realize that the marriage was about to break up and went to a club where I got drunk and met another girl, Vera. I started dating her. It was very intrusive. I didn't like her, I just liked her, but that's all. And she seems to have a huge crush on me. I didn't seem to mind, but I didn't reciprocate. She came to me every day, took care of the house, brought something to eat, and I didn't care. To be honest, I missed my wife. Then one morning, the doorbell rang. I thought it was that girl again. I got dressed, opened the door, and saw Leah. I couldn't believe it. I suddenly felt sick and happy at the same time. She turned on me as before, as if there had never been a parting between us for almost a year. We enjoyed each other all day, and it wasn't until the evening that she told me that she missed me. We frankly admitted to each other that we had a relationship during this time. Yes, I was terribly jealous of her boyfriend, but I knew I had a girlfriend myself. I told her about it, to be honest. We agreed to break all ties and try to continue loving each other again. That evening, I was supposed to meet up with Faith. When I saw her sitting on a bench outside, barely approaching, I told her that everything was over between us, that I loved my wife, and we were together again. Of course, it was unpleasant and painful for her, but I couldn't lie. I went home, and the next morning, Leah and I agreed to go for a drive around the city. When I got to the car, I was just freaking out. My white car was covered in red paint. That girl drew a male sexual organ on it, wrote obscene words everywhere, and my paraphrased name, Anton. I was really angry, but Leah calmed me down by telling me that Vera just needed time to cool down. Barely as we washed the car at the sink, we returned home. Exactly the same inscriptions were written on the entrance. Yes, she was not too lazy to go around all 7 floors until she reached my door. At least I didn't give her the keys to the apartment. A day later, she made such inscriptions on the door and the car already fittings. Broke the windows, punctured the tires, broke the peephole on the front door. This girl did not calm down, and I can see that I strongly touched her to the quick. Leah asked me to meet her and talk things over. I agreed and texted her about the meeting. I left the house and waited for her in a cafe. About an hour later, my wife calls me in hysterics and cries. She couldn't really say anything, so I ran home scared and saw an ambulance at the entrance. It turns out Vera watched me leave, rang the doorbell, and when Leah came out, she sprayed something on her face. It's a good thing nothing terrible happened. Leah received a small burn from an unknown mixture, but everything was fine. Then I couldn't stand it any longer and asked the police for help. Only then did Vera calm down a little. I never thought my mistress would be more jealous than my wife. Anyway, Leah and I left there again and went back to the city where our love was born. Now we have decided to settle down a little and not break up. By the way, very soon our family will have another person.